Okay, so deep bow. Welcome everyone, and especially welcome to our guest. We can say Ajahn Nisabho, or also who goes by Tan Nisabho from the Clear Mountain Monastery in Seattle, Washington, or Clear Mountain Monastery in development. Um, Glad
We
that you're
put in
all,
quotes,
yeah, can put
monastery.
in quotes monastery. Um, we can take a few moments to give everyone time to join in and see that we are live, and we will shortly begin. Okay, so please make sure to say hello over on the YouTube so we can know that you are here. Hello, JB, Kanagawati, Sila, Meg, ABC, MSM. Over on the Discord, we have Aaliyah, Amanda, Andrew, Craig, Jonathan, Julie, Matthew, Monifa, Nina, Sonia, Stephanie, Steve, Titi, and Orn and Spirit, Bia, Nicole. Everybody's starting to gather in here. So we are having a kind of special event today with our special guest, Ajahn Nisabho. And we're going to start with a little bit of Buddhist chanting, and then we will move into Ajahn Nisabho will kind of let us all know about what he's doing and practicing and kind of introducing himself. And then we may have some time for Q&A as well. All right, so Ajahn Nisabho, please can take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bante. It's nice to join you in the community here. I met Bante Varapanyo about 2 years ago, I think, or a year and a half online. But this is the first time I think we've gotten a chance to speak in a while. So yeah, it's nice to touch in. I thought we could start with a classic, the Buddha's Words on Loving Kindness chant, because others on this live stream might know it and can chant along. If you don't, just type in Abhayagiri Chanting Book PDF and scroll to page 28 if you want to follow along. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, freed from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Okay. So I'm just introducing myself a bit. Is that kind of the step?
Yeah, I think you can introduce yourself and let people know about. We have everyone who's watching along on YouTube. Let them know about your background and maybe how you became a monk, and then also what you're doing now. People be very interested to know for sure.
The picture. So I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and when I was 15, I read Siddhartha, like many a burgeoning hippie. And the Christians call them moments of grace, but it's that sensation of stepping into a footprint that you feel was made for you. And the first image of the Buddha that was in that book for me was that sensation of clicking into or encountering something that felt more right than almost anything I'd felt before that. So I started to meditate, and it became a more and more important part of my life until after finishing university in Portland, I basically decided I wanted to try to go forth and ordain. And we, my life in college had been pretty good. And, I was trying to do what good I could and was aiming for a career in psychotherapy, but it always felt slightly off. Just like I wasn't completely dedicating things towards a life worthy of my death, is how I usually put it. And so I was looking into grad schools, driving down the California coast, and I happened to stop off at Abayagiri, a monastery north of San Francisco. And stepping into the quiet there, it was so clear to me how hard I'd been running. I'd been listening to Top 40 radio and Dan Savage podcasts and reading The Hunger Games and just distracting myself in every way I could. And I stepped into the quiet of that monastery and knew I needed a container like that if I wasn't going to dilute my life. So I saw a video of Ajahn Chah, a really famous Thai forest master, and the teacher of Jack Cornfield and Longpo Sumedho and the like. And it was, I'd never seen a video of someone like that. There's a sort of 5-minute interview clip with him online when he's in England. And it's just so apparent, the radiance of this being. So I went off to Thailand and I ordained about 10 years ago. And I spent a few years practicing in Thai forest monasteries in the jungle. I spent a while in Australia. I spent about a year and a half at Abayagiri with Longpo Pasano. I spent some time living with Ajahn Jayasaro in Thailand, which was a blessing. But throughout it all, and it felt like the most worthy use of my life, the best thing I'd ever done, even though I was, it was hard for a lot of it. But I always felt a call back to the Northwest. And about a year ago, I came to Seattle, returned here near where I'd grown up, and just with the intention of seeing if there was interest in a monastery and a Dharmic refuge. So in my tradition, we don't use money. We can't store food. So these were admonitions put in place by the Buddha so that the Sangha couldn't cut itself off from society. And basically, it's not held universally across all orders at this point. But what I found is what it allowed or necessitated was going for alms every day into the city. So I arrived in Seattle, and some really lovely practitioners offered a little hut behind their house for me to live in. And every morning I'd go into Pike Place Market and stand by the Starbucks there, the first Starbucks. I told Ajahn Pasano I was going to go alms there, and he said it's like a pilgrimage. So I get to go there and stand, and people are curious. They come up and ask what you are, what I am, and I say I'm a Buddhist monk, and they say, they maybe they offer a sandwich, or maybe they just want to talk. But we can't I can't ask for anything except for water unless invited. Um, and after waiting there for about a half an hour, I walk back to the ferry and take it back to the kuti where I am, and have the meal. And I bring this sort of practical day-to-day aspect up because uh, the Buddha created something really special, I think, with the Sangha, obviously, but part of it is this ethic of complete surrender. And it's how I think this project has been growing, is with the real idea, like, you go for alms and see what comes. And if it's enough, it's enough. If it's not, it's, you're hungry for the day. But you really see how when you approach with that complete surrender, the Dharma and the universe rise to meet you. And, the first day I went for alms, 7 people spontaneously offered food out of nowhere. And there's been days where someone will offer some food, but maybe not enough for me to feel full. And I'll be walking back and be like, well, today's a hungry day. And then some man, this happened a few months ago, came out of the alleyway with a box of protein bars and just gave them to me. Like, that's never happened. And you really feel held. So that's been the ethic of this whole project, is just you come and see what kind of forms. And we've been having these regular Saturday morning gatherings where there's been a really lovely community forming. And the end vision is to have a monastery where basically the doors are open, and people can come for a day or a week or a month and stay for free. That's what it's like at Abhayagiri. It's all offered completely freely, and monks will be able to live. And you really see why the Buddha set up this institution of monasteries in society, kind of nearby towns, because it alters the fabric of the society surrounding, and people can come for morning chanting and evening chanting, and it becomes a bit of an axis mundi. And I know so many practitioners with one foot in the monastery and one foot on a banana peel. They encounter the Dhamma, and it's the best thing they've ever tasted. And it's so hard to figure out how to honor that vision in your daily life. And I think monasteries are the great missing ingredient. So, I think if there's a place and an ability for something like that to grow in Seattle, that would be lovely. And we've only been here for a year. We'll see what happens, but it's been a real blessing just to see the interest and the lovely people coming out of that. So that's sort of a quick/long rundown. Rondé, I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
Oh, that sounds really wonderful. I'm sure that's informative to a lot of people here. I found in my kind of practices of running an online practice group that people may not really have the cultural background to know what a monk is, or to have an idea about supporting the monk. But once they learn about it, and once they kind of get involved, they see the benefit that comes with being a part of a community that's not just like secular, but that there's a full-time kind of base, or a full-time someone who's focused full-time on that practice, and there's this kind of mutual support that goes on. But it's
And it's
new.
really,
It's new for a lot of Western people. They, even if they don't know what a monk is, they're interested. So that's what I found.
I think that's really true. And I think it's a missing archetype in the cultural consciousness of the US. I mean, we lost it after the Reformation, and there was good reason to reform the Catholic Church, but I feel like our culture's been scrambling to recover that lost archetype ever since, and we projected it onto our artists, onto our writers, but like none of them can quite hold that mantle like a monastic institution can, and like Bukowski's just not a good guide for your life. So
Bukowski,
he's just a jerk. He's a really great writer, but a
Charles
jerk, and
Bukowski, I'm a big fan. Yeah, he's a really great
great
writer, isn't
writer,
he?
horrible person. And that's my point. It's like you can see how much spiritual authority we vest these figures with. And it's like
Right.
our culture has this missing piece in its heart. And
Oh.
um, so, yeah, he's a
I
great
think
writer.
I think a part of it is the sincerity. There's a sincerity expressed in his writing, and that a lot of the people who are celebrities or politicians who are filling the archetype of sincerity are doing so exactly not sincerely.
Mm,
Celebrities are masters of deception.
mm.
Politicians are masters of manipulation, at least at the worst in some situations.
Well, I think that's true. And I think part of it's even those who are sincere, if all you, because there's a real vision of truth involved in kind of seeing the decay and the impermanence that so many authors and artists point to, but unless there's also a vision of the path out, then you know it's not the full, there's nowhere to go. And I find that's really where a lot of Western literature runs into a wall, is it's like it has nothing it can come to except like this reveling in anicca, and it lacks a vision of the transcendent, and that's what our culture is missing, is a canopy of meaning and a purpose that's worthy of that
What
nature.
what is it you said? This reveling in anicca? What's that? Could you say more
So
about that?
it's like who wrote The Road again? What was his name? He wrote All the Pretty Horses. John McCormack or something. Anyways, he's a brilliant author, but so much of it kind of comes to this idea of like God is dead. You know, and there's so much. Almost all Western literature can do with that is just kind of revel in this sort of momentary, uh, fleeting thing we have in terms of life. And there's, it's not like we don't want to appreciate life as it is in its transitoriness, but without a vision of the transcendent and of spiritual goodness, it's just such a limited vision. And I think that's where religion that's palatable, a spiritual practice, and the Four Noble Truths become so essential, is providing the path out. Otherwise, it's just Plato's prisoner seeing through the shadows as shadows. But what the Buddhist path does is it lets the prisoner turn his head and see the way out of the cave. Like it provides a path towards the transcendent, towards that which is beyond the shifting, decaying conditions. Anyways, this is its own rabbit hole, so I don't know if that's where we
Well,
want to.
I think there's a point here about embodied practice, and the maybe that the in a lot of respects, I think the even the image of virtue is being lost. Even the
Mm,
aspiration of being virtuous is being lost and exchanged for some kind of reveling in anicca, or reveling in the pleasant experiences that materialism can offer in a hopeless experience of unsatisfactory human life. So the image is almost being lost, but it's still there, right? People can connect with this idea of virtue, but something that the monastic institution or the form kind of involves in this, and something that I've been very empowered by in being a monk, is that I can live through my virtue.
mm,
My practice of virtue is enough for me to live, and ideally to also transcend, to be free from suffering completely.
mm,
But when you have that monastic form, there's this there's this constant lived relationship between someone who is abandoning materialism or abandoning to the best degree that they can their personal ability to get what they want and avoid what they don't want for the
Mm,
sake of being virtuous. And then
mm,
from that position, they're supported.
mm,
So when you do alms round, when you feed the monk, when you realize that the monk doesn't use money, it kind of goes without saying in Asian society or in a Buddhist society. But where is the teacher going to sleep? Right? What is the teacher going to eat? And in the West, we don't even think about that. Um, Partly because people are trying to sell meditation. People are
mm.
selling mindfulness, people are trying to sell spirituality or sell virtue. And it's one of the joys of being a monk is that you can share it and you don't have to sell it. Um,
Yeah,
but
I agree. I
having a
agree.
monastery in your area, it's a wonderful experience because you can practice to generosity to support virtue.
Mm,
To support the transcendent in a lived, embodied, kind of grounded way that makes it not something that's even like an image, but it's a necessity and it's embodied.
mm.
Practice always has to be like that, one way or another, or it's not practice, right?
Yeah, yeah, I really agree with that.
So we have a lot of people watching through YouTube. Do you want to take some questions or anything that comes up that you'd like to share or to touch on? Um, and maybe some people in the chat could also, if you have some topics, we can see if Ajahn could say something about it. But if you have something more to
I'd
share.
I'd love to take I'd love to take questions. Thank you. And I mean, the one thing I'd say before them is just I think we can get quite jaded about the world today. And one thing that being in robes really does allow you to see is just how much goodness holds the world together. We do a practice called tudong, which is where you just kind of wander around this. You wander from one place to another, and you sleep on the side of the road, and you wait to see. You know, you'll go for alms, and if people will give, they give. If they don't, they don't. And I've done it in the West several times, and it's just been astounding how, like, it works. People in the US, even though they don't totally know what you are, you do get enough food and you do find places to sleep, even if it's just on the side of the road. And yeah, people, I think, get quite fixated on the news and things these days. And, you know, there's tragedy in the world, but um, I feel a real vision of the Dhamma balances that out well when you see how much goodness there is in people as well. So it's good to keep in mind. Hegel said that evil lies in the gaze that sees evil all around it. And I feel like that's something we really have to watch out for. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to speak to any questions people have or do my best.
Okay, let's see what comes up here. Okay, so one question here from Bree. They said, our culture has sort of lost a rite of passage, rituals and ceremonies like a gateway between childhood and adulthood. What sort of rite of passages are there in Buddhism, and which rites of passage do you think would be better for American youth to take on?
That is such a good question. Bante, what do you think? I can try to answer it, but I'm
Well,
curious about your thoughts on it
I
too.
mean, It's really to, I think, to have interactions with virtuous people and to be put in a position where you are stuck or left out of your usual privileges and abilities and ways of thinking, like the box that you've put yourself in, to be taken outside of that box and to go through that just through your own power of sincerity. So I think an
Mm-hmm.
amazing rite of passage would be a camping trip with Ajahn Nisabho and Bhante Warapanyo. I mean, that'd be a heck of a kind of rite of passage. But having these experiences where you go outside of your comfort zone and then have to, to face and meet yourself and come out on the other side, not using your privilege, but using your, kind of your sincerity, your ability to go beyond.
That's a good answer. Um, I think I'd only add, yeah, I think you're pointing to a huge deficit in our culture. It's sort of we have getting drunk, college, and that's kind of it. And that's not a terribly great rite of passage. In Thailand, they temporary ordination is the rite of passage for males, at least, is 2 weeks or 3 months as a monk. It used to be 3 months for that was kind of a prerequisite before you could marry, and um, you it was considered a way you paid back your parents. You did something really good to sort of with them in mind, and that's such a beautiful act in so many ways. I mean, you can look at the drawbacks of it, saying, if it's you should only ordain as a monk if you're really dedicated to keep that form for life or something. But it's very meaningful in Thai society to have, before you embark on a career and a marriage, just to have 3 months to take time and contemplate what you want to do with your life and what's meaningful to you and what's trivial. So much of the tragedy of American life isn't that we lose ourselves in these, you know, horrible, oppressive conditions always. Often it's just the slow diluting of our purpose in a confluence of comfort and convenience. And that's no less tragic for the fact that it happens almost unnoticed. And to get a chance to step out of that environment, like Bhante Warapanya was saying, and have to exist on the basis of sincerity and virtue and to see things from the outside, it's so valuable. So I think that's a great answer. I think camping trips with monks would be great if that's available, but if that's not, going to monasteries, a retreat's great, but honestly, there are so many monasteries people don't realize that you can go and visit and for free. There's a Bayagiri in California. There's Empty Cloud on the East Coast. There's the Bhavana Society in Virginia. I think there's Temple Forest Monastery. There's if you go to forestdhamma.org, you'll see just a list of the monasteries in the Ajahn Chah tradition, and there's many more besides that I don't know of. There's Sarvasti Abbey, which is a Tibetan monastery. There's Deer Park, where Bhante Warapanya is going to be going for 3 months near LA. So just taking a few days, honestly, is enough for a lot to happen. But longer than that, that's a powerful rite of passage. And if not that, then the whole concept of a gap year is quite powerful, I think. And letting the winds take you where they will. And yeah, Ajahn Jayasaro did a year as a layman without using any money, or longer than a year, and just to see if it was possible. That's pretty extreme, but you can take the ethic to heart. So, yeah, good question.
Thank you, Venerable. Okay, so looks like we have one person who wants to ask a question with their voice. So we'll see if that's possible for them to hop in. Robert, are you there? They're connecting to the audio. Robert, are you there? Oh, disappeared. Well, that's it, isn't it? Okay, so Chronic the Hedgehog. This is this is the age of online Dharma.
Mhm.
Says, hello, how to stop reincarnation once and for all? And this question definitely, especially for Ajahn Nisabho.
Well, especially for the Buddha on this one. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, reincarnation it's a hard one for a lot of people to palate as a worldview. And so often we point to, reincarnation as, looking at it as the process of day to day being born into mind states, into fantasies, into hopes, and grasping onto them and tying our heart to things. And then when the things break, the heart breaks, and just watching that process and applying the Four Noble Truths, basically, of comprehending suffering, or seeing it, feeling its shape, letting go of craving its cause, realizing peace, cessation of it, and walking and developing the path towards that peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the Four Noble Truths with their incumbent duties. And effectively, what you're doing is it's a learned skill. Like ignorance, which is the root of suffering in Buddhist thought, is ignorance of the learned skill of seeing things clearly, of seeing the Four Noble Truths. So that's what meditation is for, and being mindful is you watch the whole trajectory of experience, and often what happens is we revel in birth, and that can be the birth of a moment. So if people know dependent origination, which is the Buddhist 12-link cycle of how we cycle through suffering, and it's the most profound piece of psychology I think ever articulated. But part of it is basically craving leading to birth, leading to becoming, leading to birth, leading to suffering. And you can look at that in a multi-life perspective, or you can look at it in your current experience. And birth, craving, basically there's sensory contact leads to craving, leads to becoming, leads to birth. And birth is the moment of peak dopamine sort of release. So they've done studies of, when that is. And it's, if you're purchasing an object, peak dopamine release happens right at the cash register when you're typing in the basically when you're swiping the credit card for the item. So that's birth. And you can apply that to like every experience, like falling in love. And we revel in that, and then we ignore everything that comes afterwards. And that can seem harmless until you realize that what that does is it makes us get drunk on and exaggerate and lose ourselves in experiences that aren't worthy of tying ourselves and our hearts to. So for example, falling for someone head over heels and really giving all of our, depending on them for all of our happiness, that's birth. And what a terrible thing to do to someone, to ask them to fulfill you. Like who can do that? And and if you become good at looking at the Four Noble Truths and seeing the fading of things, because everything fades, and watching how things change and how the new item loses a bit of its luster after time, and the relationship changes, into something more wholesome perhaps, and less passionate, that's fine. But it just lets you take a slight step back and stop tying your heart to things, and stop getting drunk on them and exaggerating them. And Ajahn Sucitto defines mindfulness as hovering 1 foot off the ground, or 1 inch off the ground. And, in Buddhism, we do we do hold things in our hands, but we hold them lightly and we can put them down when we need to. And basically, the whole aspect of Buddhism is switching from the energy of feeding off of the world to one of giving to the world. And this slight restraint and seeing the full arc of experience and seeing how it does fade over time, we stop trying to feed off of the world and we cultivate the inner resource of meditation, of morality, of loving kindness. And this allows us to approach the world with a sense of blessing and giving. And this is the first step towards ending rebirth, is you stop being born into experience after experience, and you are able to watch it with a degree of equanimity. And it doesn't mean you're cold or you stop, enjoying the things you enjoy or loving the people you love, but you stop feeding off of them and being born into them and then having the experience die like it does. Instead, you can be there with those experiences with a much more wholesome relationship to them and not be born into them and sort of hold them as they pass. And eventually, taken to the ultimate is you stop being reborn into any concept of self or any experience in that way. And in the Buddhist worldview, that leads to an ending of rebirth in a very literal sense. And one issue with that term is that people really think that it means a sort of this blank nothingness. And that's not the case. The Buddha was very clear, Nibbana is beyond words and, empty of self, but full of reality. And you look at the beings who have touched that, and there's the most alive people you've ever met and the most loving and selfless people you've ever encountered. So, but the Buddha didn't reify or conceptualize it very much, because then we attach to it and that shuts us off from what is beyond concepts. So he told you how to get there. He said it's good. He gave it a name, Nibbana, the transcendent, and then he trusted us to do the rest. So that's somewhat of a roundabout answer, but that's how you stop rebirth, is you follow the Eightfold Path to its end. Bhante, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't to add to that. Really well said. I appreciate it. Um, so I tried to find another question to answer, to bring up for you, Venerable. Many people here, they hear me talking all the time. That too much, surely. So it's really great to hear your insight in some of these things.
Yes. And just to address, rebirth, people really do get hung up on it. And the Buddha was so clear that it's not an essential piece of the worldview to practice initially. And there does come a point where it is helpful on the path, and it is in the suttas. So we don't have to believe in it. It's fine if not. But I do find that there comes a point in practice where there's a place to investigate it, because it's an important question. You can sort of take this agnostic stance on it for a while, but it affects our existential situation pretty directly. So just to say, if people want to look into it a little more, what really turned my mind around it was the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was a University of Virginia professor who investigated and interviewed all these children about their past lives and then verified the stories. And he was followed around by numerous journalists who wrote books about it. But there's a book called Life Before Life, which is, I found, very convincing and quite good. And there's also a podcast called Hi-Fi Nation. The Survival of the Self is the title. So if people are interested, it's interesting to look into, but I wouldn't let it turn you off the practice if you don't accept rebirth. It's a lot to accept, and it's not necessary to believe it in order to practice well.
Thank you, Venerable. Um, okay, so here's a question. What is the difference between, from Matt, what are the differences between your two traditions? What is the significance of the color of your robes?
I'm curious about that too,
Sure.
Bante. So please.
Well, we can say that Ajahn Nisabho here comes from a very um, kind of well-known and established and kind of highly regarded tradition for Western monastics out of Thailand, um, and also quite sectarian, and has a very established in a tradition of training Westerners from Thailand. So his robes in particular represent that. Also, the way that he wears his robes, although it's a little bit looks a little bit similar, it's also a little bit different. That's from the Thai Forest tradition. And the tradition that I am a part of and following is from Myanmar. And my teacher is kind of like make a new, not a new sect, but a not such an established tradition of teaching. He kind of branch off from his teacher and focusing more on social justice or social work, outside work. What's the name for? What's the Pali word for it? The doing outside deeds.
Merit, punya would be one, but
There's
that can
some,
be meditation as well. So
yeah.
yeah,
There's some
whatever
word
wish.
about the being very involved
Pizza.
in the social work or the doing
Mm.
outside activities, and so he's very involved with that and doesn't in any way emphasize like a cloistered practice. Whereas for Ajahn Nisabho here, his tradition, they have many monks and nuns. Well, many monks and nuns who spend a lot of time in isolation, and also with a lot of Westerners are involved in Ajahn Nisabho's tradition, whereas for me, I'm one of two. There's only one other Western monk in this tradition, and it's a woman, it's a nun from Italy. So quite a bit different, but the basic principles are shared. Um, and also, we're both in the Theravada tradition, but um, it's often said that Ajahn Chah had a Zen leaning, right? People would compare him with some like a Zen master kind of mindset. And my teacher, I also see to have a similar approach, almost a Zen like approach. So that's what I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean that's it's a good rundown, I think, and Emodina for being, blazing the trail for Westerners in the tradition. That's great, and it's not easy either. I do have an established tradition that I came out of and trained in, and it was sort of the ground was a bit set. One thing I would articulate about is people do have this image of Theravada monks as living in little huts alone, and I just haven't found it's the case at all. We, often stay in monasteries, but you live in community there, and that's one of the such a healthy thing for Westerners. It's very common for people to go to monasteries and be like, I just want to go off alone and practice. And it just, almost never seen it work right off the bat. Like, you have to learn to live with others in a community before you can learn to live alone. And we come from such isolated, the Buddha, all of his teachings on seclusion were given in a society that was unbelievably tight knit. You look at Thai villages and it was probably similar. It's like the kids are cared for by the whole village. Whereas Westerners or moderns, often we come from these very lonely existences of living isolated silos. And so a huge part of the practice is just learning to live in community. And that's, I've learned as much from that as from meditation, certainly. So yeah, and then those monasteries do serve as a refuge in a lot of ways for people to come and practice. But then, like Bhante Warapanya was saying, you have monks who have individual leanings, and there's quite a lot of room for what you can do in these robes. So we have monks working with prisoners, and then others in hospice and such. It's nice to know, but it is currently in the process of kind of expanding. And so, I don't totally identify Clear Mountain as a project of the Ajahn Chah lineage. We're not applying for formal status because there are some aspects of the lineage which I'm not totally on board with, and I did want a bit of the Buddhists set things up as a bit of a democracy ruled by the Vinaya, and so I can appreciate some of the things that you're speaking about, Bante, in terms of um, finding our own place in this whole realm, and also acknowledging that in a very real sense, we're all disciples of the Buddha. I mean, we all share these tenets of the Eightfold Path of the Vinaya, and you look at the enlightened beings from all the great traditions and the great well-practiced monks and nuns, and there's this convergence where, yeah, Ajahn Chah spoke like a Zen master often, just as Master Hua or Shu Yun often practiced so much like a Theravada monk. They're these great Mahayana masters, and I find many of the distinctions begin to fade away. They seem to be the most prominent at the beginning of the path, and there's a lot of convergence at the end, I feel. I don't know if you would agree with any of that, Bante, but
Well, convergence on the end for sure. That's been my understanding for a long time, or a while. Long time, just 29. But and yeah, I mean, the Buddhist monk position is meant to be inclusive. Period. And really, your authenticity or your legitimacy as a monk is really determined by your relationship with senior monks and people who are established, and they're established in what? Wisdom and virtue, not in certificates. When it comes down to it, when the Buddha first set up like the monastic system and people were becoming monks, you were a local serial killer eating children and butchering people. Well, if you were lucky enough to come across the monk, you were accepted just like that, right? And in the time of the Buddha, just taking the Buddha's hand, you were a monk. So people often have kind of very high-minded, almost extremist views of monks as being like just a fantasy version of a monk, of someone who lives in the forest, doesn't talk, is in a cave with other monks or things like this. But really, it's a ongoing dynamic of relationship. People who are devoting their full life to the best of their abilities to virtue, meditation, and insight.
yeah, I completely agree. And to love, that's the thing, is
Yeah.
people think that you give up love when you ordain or embark in the Theravada path because so much of the language is of renunciation or solitude. And I think that's just such a dangerous metric. I mean, you want time alone to practice, but it's so important to realize that Ajahn Amaro says, monks are the true hedonists. What I gave up when I ordained was Marvel movies and, people trying to talk to me about the Seahawks. But what I gained is I get to talk to, have meaningful conversations like this pretty constantly. And I remember my last year as a layman, I was doing the Wapta Traverse, this sort of glacial traverse up in Canada, and I was in this little hut in the snow, and this guy was just talking about outdoor gear for like 2 hours, and I just wanted to jump out a window. Like, I just something in you really begins to not. You want to do something meaningful, and falling in love as a monk in terms of this sort of spiritual love. Um, like I've fallen in love with Longpor Pasano, with Ajahn Jayasaro, with it's love, and it's just a much purer kind. And I find that such an important metric to keep in mind as Theravada practitioners, because you know the the things we should be looking for in our practice are a sense of normalcy, of flourishing, of warmth, um, and not tying ourselves up into knots to try to be these perfect beings, but doing our best, but also really feeding the heart. And this is supposed to be a bright and warm path, and I think one of the problems is we focus so much on meditation to the exclusion of giving and dana, which is sort of what you're pointing to, Bhante, with your teacher's emphasis on this work and giving back. However we do that, teaching meditation, or for some monks, really their practice is good enough, or that's their path, is to practice more and attain these rarefied states that they can bring knowledge from to all of us. But anyways, I just see that as such an important thing to remember, is you know remembering this is supposed to be a path of love, and not of sort of the heart slowly drying up or knotting itself.
Hmm. Well, we have, I know you don't have all the time in the world, but we do have maybe a good question that it would be great for you to answer. And that's from Robert Bird. So Robert Bird quite kindly says, besides Bhante Warapanyo's wonderful community, it's very kind, how do you recommend sustaining Buddhist practices when no one around you at work or at home is a Buddhist? I find it difficult to maintain.
Well, Robert, if you wouldn't mind typing this general area you live in, like what state, for example, I can give a few specific pointers if I know exactly where you are or around where you are. Um, you do the best you can. So the online communities now are pretty robust. Clear Mountain has one as well. We have a Discord, etc. That's pretty funny to start, because you get to see who in your sangha was a gamer, because they're the people who all had Discord accounts. So I got a few people surprised me that way by already being on the platform. But there are these online ways of tapping in now, which are really helpful. Embodying the form as best you're able. So the Buddha set out a lot of forms for lay people that are underutilized, holding the 5 precepts, daily life, and repeating them every morning, taking them every morning, and they will change you. In the West, we know that internal inclination affects external action. What we've forgotten is that external embodied action affects internal inclination over time. So when you take on the 5 precepts or ritual, you're training the heart. So if you really take on the first precept of not killing, after 2 years, you might find that that spider you thought was disgusting and would have smashed, after 2 years of keeping from smashing it, you kind of think it's cute. And this happens with ritual too. If you set up a shrine in your house or a meditation room, um, do it and bow at each. The first thing you do in the morning should be to bow, and the last thing you do at night. And over time, you find directing your life in that way, through this embodied action, affects your heart, and you find that you are steering yourself more by the Dhamma. Start to take meditation breaks during your lunch break at work. People will think it's a little bit strange at first, but just put a sign in your doorway or your door saying, please do not disturb, meditating for 15 minutes. And people will respect it after time. Keep up your basic meditation practice. 20 minutes a day is hygiene, basic hygiene for us practitioners. And the Buddha really spoke about taking a Sabbath day, what he called the Uposatha day. So often it's put on the full, half, and new moons, or at least the full and the new moon. But you can also just designate a day of the week, like Sunday, if it's easier, and dedicate that day at least a little more to practice. So maybe that means just meditating a bit longer, not taking entertainment. But if you want to take the Buddha's form on that day, what the Buddha recommended is taking the 8 precepts on that day. So one day a week, take the 8 precepts, which means celibacy, in addition to the usual 5 precepts. It means not sleeping on higher luxurious sleeping places. So just sleep on the ground by your bed, or don't indulge in sleep. That's the essence of it. Don't no entertainment. So turn off, no YouTube, no Netflix, and don't eat, no eating after noon. That's an interesting one for people. And, you may not be able to take it, but it is helpful because your meditation in the evening will be bright and you have a lot more free time, and maybe, your partner or your friends just have to get used to the fact that one day a week you aren't there for dinner and you're just in your room practicing. So, that can be, you take on as much of these as feels appropriate in your situation, but it's a useful form that the Buddha gave for lay people, and it will hold you to an extent. But the biggest thing I'd say is get to monastery. If you can't go every week, which most people can't, then go once a month for two days. If you can't go every month, then take a long weekend every 2 months and go for 3 days. Batch your time, or maybe a week every 6 months. But it has a real ability to kind of reorient people. I think it's really useful to do. Did we get a location for him, by the way, Bante?
Robert Byrd, Connecticut.
Hmm. You might be near Temple, Forrest Monastery-ish. I only know someone in that region. Um, Bhavana Society might be slightly near. Empty Cloud would be a drive. But I'd look into Temple Forest Monastery. You can get there, I think. And you can stay there for free. So just email them and say you'd like to come for a weekend. That's how you can sustain yourself. Bante, I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on that, and I should go after that, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it's practical. Try to find a group in your area. Try to find a temple. Google Maps is a great tool. If you search for Buddhist temple in Google Maps in your area, you can come across with some different places. And actually, a really rich practice is this kind of mini pilgrimage, right?
Mm,
You look on not every Buddhist temple is ideal and wonderful and holy, what have you, but the intention in going there is solid and clear, just like the Buddha's teachings in most cases are solid and clear, and the intention is clear. So take as a pilgrimage to, oh, look, there's this Vietnamese Buddhist temple. Give them a call ahead or just go there and visit that place and see what's going on there. And you can do that to many different Buddhist temples in your area or meditation centers in your area. And you kind of bring in the truth that this is a lived experience. This is your path. You're not just going to work, you're not just driving to work, but you're driving to this path, to wisdom. And that's something that you really want to prioritize. Okay, thank you so much, Ajahn. It's really been wonderful to have you here, and I know that many members of our community were hoping that we'll have you here again sometime, maybe in a more intimate format. Um, we can see what will happen, but uh,
it
yeah, so
was a
thankful
pleasure.
for you.
Yeah,
So,
thank you for creating this community, Bante, and for your path as well.
you want to share any final words? Usually we finish with 3 sadhus, so we'll all wrap up together, chanting sadhu together if you like. But maybe let people know how they can contact you or support you in the future if they'd like.
Support me by practicing well. Do as best you can in this. Really give yourself to it. The world needs practitioners so badly right now, and um, it's just such a gift. People don't realize the ripples the Dharma sends out. Um, if you do feel like contacting me, pretty much most of the ways would be through our website, clearmountainmonastery.org. And we have a Upasaka group for dedicated practitioners there, keeping 5 precepts in a daily practice. So you can join that. We have a daily 5 a.m. sit you can join. We have Saturday sessions and Saturday and Wednesday teachings online and in person. So just however that's helpful for you, you're welcome. If you're ever in Seattle, please reach out and we'll find you a place to stay. Probably we'll just put it out to the group and have someone host you. And yeah, please come and visit. But most of all, just I think there's so often this metric now of or looking to meditation for happiness, and it provides that. But I think it's a shallow language for what we're stepping into, like a much more powerful language, I think, is that of duty and purpose. And we've been given such a gift in these teachings. It is the most profound uh, system of training that humanity has ever come up with, as far as I can tell. And I'm pretty biased, but I think for good reason. And as practitioners, given this in this time, it's our duty to, having received this gift, we have a duty to practice it and embody it and give it to others as best we're able. And so really realizing that this is what you can give to the world, most of all, is finding a way to purify your own heart and embodying these teachings well. And that's a purpose that can sustain a life. So I wish all of you the best on that path, and you as well, Bante. And yeah, I hope you have a great time at Deer Park.
So Ajahn, maybe you can lead us in three. We do kind of a sadhu, so maybe you could lead us in three sadhus as we finish.
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu,
sadhu.
anumodami.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, Bante.
Yeah.
Goodbye to the community, and I hope we speak again soon.
Okay.
Good.
Well, that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Be happy, be peaceful. You can find Ajahn Nisabho's website and more information in the description of this video. Please do consider to leave a like if you've appreciated this event and this live stream. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.